Hello viewers. Welcome to Seek Wisdom. Today in this video, we present you the summary of the book, Ego is the Enemy, written by Ryan Holiday. It draws on a vast array of stories and examples of various personalities who reached the highest levels of power and success by conquering their own egos. Their strategies and tactics can be ours as well. In this video, we have not covered those stories, but only the lessons that these tell us. Let's get started. Maybe you're young and you're struggling, just got fired or just hit rock bottom. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, your worst enemy already lives inside you, and that is your ego. This book is about the ego, which is defined as an unhealthy belief in our own importance, arrogance and self-centered ambition. Ego is the enemy of what you want and of what you have. It's a magnet for enemies and errors. It is there at the root of almost every conceivable problem and obstacle. With every ambition and goal we have, ego is there undermining us on the very journey. Ego is the voice that tells us we're better than we really are, and so it inhibits true success by preventing a direct and honest connection to the world around us. In this way, we can't recognize or create opportunities. This inaccurate accounting of our own abilities develops delusion in place of confidence. Comfort is what keeps ego around. Pursuing great work is often terrifying. Ego soothes that fear, replacing the rational and aware parts of our psyche with bluster and self-absorption. Ego tells us what we want to hear. But it is a short-term fix with a long-term consequence. Now more than ever, our culture fans the flames of ego. It's never been easier to talk, to puff ourselves up. We can publish articles about ourselves in outlets that used to be sources of objective journalism. At any given time in life, people find themselves at one of three stages. We're aspiring to something, achieved success, or we have failed. Ego is the enemy every step along this way. So, this book is divided into three parts. Aspire, success and failure. The purpose of this book is to make us humble in our aspirations, gracious in our success, and resilient in our failures. Let's start with the first part, aspire. Here, we are setting out to do something. We have a goal. We build ourselves up with fantastical stories. We pretend we have it all figured out. These are symptoms of ego, for which humility and reality are the cure. One must ask, if your belief in yourself is not dependent on actual achievement, then what is it dependent on? The answer, too often, is nothing. And this is why we so often see precipitous rises followed by calamitous falls. Our cultural values almost try to make us dependent on validation, entitled, and ruled by our emotions. For a generation, parents and teachers have focused on building up everyone's self-esteem. In reality, this makes us weak. One might say that the ability to evaluate one's own ability is the most important skill of all. And certainly ego makes it difficult every step of the way. It is certainly more pleasurable to focus on our talents and strengths, but it develops arrogance and self-absorption which inhibit growth. In this phase, detachment is a sort of natural ego antidote. For your work to have truth in it, it must come from truth. Though we think big, we must act and live small in order to accomplish what we seek. Aggression, self-absorption, and endless self-promotion jeopardize your efforts. First comes talking. Today social media culture promotes talking. Blank spaces on various platforms begging to be filled with your thoughts. It's a temptation that exists for everyone. We seem to think that silence is a sign of weakness. So we talk as though our life depends on it. In actuality, silence is strength. Strategic flexibility is not the only benefit of silence. It is also psychology. Talk depletes us. Research shows that while goal visualization is important, after a certain point our mind begins to confuse it with actual progress. The same goes for verbalization. Even talking aloud to ourselves while we work through difficult problems has been shown to significantly decrease insight and breakthroughs. The more difficult the task, the more uncertain the outcome, the more costly talk will be, and the farther we run from actual accountability. The only relationship between work and chatter is that one kills the other. Next is to be or to do. Whatever we seek to do in life, reality soon intrudes on our youthful idealism. This reality comes in many names and forms: incentives, commitments, recognition, and politics. In every case, they can quickly redirect us from doing to being. Ego aids in that deception every step of the way. If we are not careful, we can very easily find ourselves corrupted by the very occupation we wish to serve. Often we fall in love with an image of what success looks like. For other people, accomplishment is their job title, the number of assistants they have, the size of their paycheck, or the number of fans they have. Appearances are deceiving. Having authority is not the same as being an authority. Being promoted doesn't necessarily mean you're doing good work. Ego crosses out what matters and replaces it with what doesn't. If your purpose is something larger than you, then suddenly everything becomes both easier and more difficult. Easier in the sense that you know now what it is you need to do and what is important to you. The other choices wash away. In this course, it is not who do I want to be in life, but what is it that I want to accomplish in life? The earlier you ask yourself these questions, the better. Think about this the next time you face the choice: do I need this? Or is it really about ego? Try to be a student. The power of being a student is not just that it is an extended period of instruction, it also places the ego and ambition in someone else's hands. There is a sort of ego ceiling imposed when one knows that he is not better than the master he apprentices under. Studious self-assessment is the antidote. A true student is like a sponge, absorbing what goes on around him, filtering it, latching onto what he can hold. A student is self-critical and self-motivated, always trying to improve his understanding so that he can move on to the next topic, the next challenge. A real student is also his own teacher and his own critic. There is no room for ego there. We are told to be passionate. Find your passion. Live passionately. Inspire the world with your passion. But your passion may be the very thing holding you back from power or accomplishment. Because just as often, we fail because of passion. Instead of passion, we need purpose and direction. Don't get driven by passion, rather by reason. In our endeavors, we will face complex problems, often in situations we've never faced before. What is really called for in these circumstances is clarity, deliberateness, and methodological determination. Passion typically masks a weakness. Its breathlessness and impetuousness and franticness are poor substitutes for discipline, mastery, strength and purpose. Purpose is like passion with boundaries. Realism is detachment and perspective. During aspiring stage, we may feel ourselves as working like slaves and can develop rage. For this, the solution is to follow the Canvas strategy, which states, clear the path for the people above you and you will eventually create a path for yourself. When you are just starting out, we can be sure of a few fundamental realities. 1. You're not nearly as good or as important as you think you are. 2. You have an attitude that needs to be readjusted. 3. Most of what you think you know or most of what you learned in books or in school is out of date or wrong. There's one fabulous way to work all that out of your system. Attach yourself to people and organizations who are already successful and subsume your identity into theirs and move both forward simultaneously. Another advantage of this strategy is, it reduces your ego at a critical time in your career. On our path, we may face situations when it will be tough to keep our self-control. In this scenario, ego is the absolute opposite of what is needed. Those who have subdued their ego understand that it doesn't degrade you when others treat you poorly. It degrades them. Your ego screams for you to indulge it. Instead, you must do nothing. Play the game. Ignore the noise. Do not let it distract you. Next is to get out of your head. It is natural for any young, ambitious person to get excited and swept up by their thoughts and feelings in a world that tells us to keep and promote a personal brand. We're required to tell stories in order to sell our work and our talents, and after enough time, forget where the line is that separates our fictions from reality. Ultimately, this disability will paralyze us. It feels good, and so we stay stuck inside our heads instead of participating in the world around us. That's ego. What successful people do is curb such flights of fancy. They ignore the temptations that might make them feel important or skew their perspective. Living clearly and presently takes courage. Be part of what's going on around you. Feast on it, adjust for it. Next comes the dangers of early pride. Pride blunts the very instrument we need to own in order to succeed, that is our mind. Our ability to learn, to adapt, to be flexible, to build relationships, is dulled by pride. Most dangerously, this tends to happen either early in life or in the process. Only later do you realize that that bump on the head was the least of what was risked. Pride takes a minor accomplishment and makes it feel like a major one. What a pitiful thing it is when a man lets a little temporary success spoil him, warp his judgment, and he forgets what he is. It creates a sort of myopic obsession that warps perspective, reality, truth, and the world around us. Receive feedback, maintain hunger, and chart is a proper course in life. The question to ask, when you feel pride, then, is this: what am I missing right now that a more humble person might see? What am I avoiding, or running from, with my bluster, franticness, and embellishments? It is far better to ask and answer these questions now, with the stakes still low, than it will be later. Also, just because you acquire doesn't mean that you are without pride. Privately thinking you're better than others is still pride. It's still dangerous. The distinction between a professional and a dilettante occurs right there, when you accept that having an idea is not enough. That you must work until you are able to recreate your experience effectively in words on the page. Our ego wants the ideas and the fact that we aspire to do something about them to be enough. So solution is to work upon it. Forget how many hours it may take, but do not leave unless it is completed. Ego says, fake it till you make it. While, make it so you don't have to fake it, is the key. Keep in mind that ego is a wicked sister of success. Here comes the second part, success. Here we are at the top of a mountain we worked hard to climb, or at least the summit is in sight. Now we face new temptations and problems. Ego shortens your stay at the summit. As success arrives, ego begins to toy with our minds and weaken the will. This is one of the reasons why empires fail from within. Whether in middle management or top management, unbridled personal egotism blinds a man to the realities around him. Success is intoxicating, yet to sustain it requires sobriety. We can't keep learning if we think we already know everything. First advice is to always remain a student. As we first succeed, we will find ourselves in new situations, facing new problems. As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. It takes a special kind of humility to grasp that you know less, even as you know and grasp more and more. If you're not still learning, you're already dying. We want so desperately to believe that those who have great empires set out to build one, so we can indulge in the pleasurable planning of ours. So we can take full credit for the good that happens and the riches and respect that come our way. Crafting stories out of past events is a very human impulse. Writing our own narrative leads to arrogance. Also, once you win, everyone is gunning for you. It's during your moment at the top that you can afford ego the least because the stakes are so much higher. When we achieve success, we must resist the desire to pretend that everything unfolded exactly as we planned. We're never happy with what we have, we want what others have too. We want to have more than everyone else. Ego sways us, and can ruin us. The farther you travel down that path of accomplishment, the more often you meet other successful people who make you feel insignificant. It doesn't matter how well you're doing. Your ego and their accomplishments make you feel like nothing. So we unconsciously pick up the pace to keep up with others. So understand what is important for you. Only you know the race you're running, unless your ego decides the only way you have value is if you're better than, have more than, everyone everywhere. What we've accomplished often required feats of raw power and force of will. Achieving success involved ignoring the doubts and reservations of the people around us. It meant rejecting rejection. Whether you're a billionaire, a millionaire, or just a kid who snagged a good job early. The complete and utter sense of certainty that got you here can become a liability if you're not careful, otherwise it will give rise to entitlement. As you become successful in your own field, your responsibilities may begin to change. Days become less and less about doing and more about making decisions. It requires a certain humility to put aside some of the more enjoyable or satisfying parts of your previous job. It means accepting that others might be more qualified or specialized in areas in which you considered yourself competent. What matters is that you learn how to manage yourself and others before your industry eats you alive. For us, it's beginning to think that we're better, that we're special, that our problems and experiences are so incredibly different from everyone else's that no one could possibly understand. Such thinking while working in a team is a disease of me. Save yourself from it. Let's make one thing clear, we never earn the right to be greedy or to pursue our interests at the expense of everyone else. To think otherwise is not only egotistical, it's counterproductive. Ego tells us that meaning comes from activity, that being the center of attention is the only way to matter. No wonder we find success empty. Here's an exercise: walk onto an ancient battlefield or a place of historical significance. Look at the statues and you can't help but see how similar the people look, how little has changed since then. In those moments, we have a sense of the immensity of the world. At that time ego is impossible, because we realize that every man is a quotation from all his ancestors. Embrace the power of this position and learn from it. By removing the ego we can access what's left standing in relief. Remind yourself how pointless it is to rage and fight and try to one-up those around you. Maintain your sobriety. We have to fight to stay sober, despite the many different forces swirling around our ego. It involves elimination of the unnecessary and the destructive. No more obsessing about your image, treating people beneath you or above you with contempt. Sobriety is the counterweight that must balance out success. Behind every goal is a drive to be happy and fulfilled, but when egotism takes hold, we lose track of our goal and end up somewhere we never intended. Now comes the third part: failure. No one is permanently successful. We all deal with setbacks along the way. Ego leaves us unprepared for these circumstances. If success is ego intoxication, then failure can be a devastating ego blow. You could say that failure always arrives uninvited, but through our ego, far too many of us allow it to stick around. Humble and strong people don't have the same trouble with these troubles that egotists do. According to Robert Greene, there are two types of time in our lives: dead time, when people are passive and waiting, and alive time, when people are learning and acting and utilizing every second. Every moment of failure, choose to live in a live time. The dead time was when we were controlled by ego. In life, there will be times when we do everything right, perhaps even perfectly. Yet the results will somehow be negative: failure, disrespect, jealousy, or even a resounding yawn from the world. Depending on what motivates us, this response can be crushing. If ego holds sway, we'll accept nothing less than full appreciation. Understand that once we have done our work, the result is judged, received, and acted on by other people. Here we need to understand that it is not in our control. But due to this judgment, do not reduce your effort, rather do your best. Pick a time in your life that threw you back in your chair, speechless and dumbfounded. It was in those moments that you were forced to make eye contact with truth. Now is the opportunity, but ego blocks us from improving. Change begins by hearing the criticism and the words of the people around you. Even if those words are mean-spirited, angry, or hurtful. We take risks. We mess up. The problem is that when we get our identity tied up in our work, we worry that any kind of failure will then say something bad about us as a person. It's a fear of taking responsibility, of admitting that we might have messed up. It's the sunk cost fallacy. Ego asks, why is this happening to me? Only ego thinks embarrassment or failure are more than what they are. History is full of people who suffered abject humiliations yet recovered to have long and impressive careers. At any given time in the circle of life, we may be aspiring, succeeding, or failing. With wisdom, we understand that these positions are transitory, not statements about your value as a human being. When success begins to slip from your fingers, the response isn't to grip and claw so hard that you shatter it to pieces. It's to understand that you must work yourself back to the aspirational phase. You must get back to first principles and best practices. Start maintaining your scorecard. This internal scorecard should be different from the external scorecard because people can get lucky and win. But not everyone is the best possible version of themselves. Reflecting on what went well or how amazing we are doesn't get us anywhere, but we want to go further. Ego blocks that, so we subsume it and smash it with continually higher standards. When you take ego out of the equation, we're inching our way toward real improvement, with discipline rather than disposition. Better response to an attack or something you don't like is love. Otherwise the world will witness another example of a timeless and sad pattern. We must strip ourselves of the ego that protects and suffocates us, because hate at any point is a cancer that gnaws away at the very vital center of your life and your existence. Take inventory for a second. What do you dislike? Where has hatred and rage ever really gotten anyone? We will experience difficulties and ego is the swing vote. Aspiration leads to success. Success creates its own adversity. And adversity leads to aspiration and more success. It's an endless loop. Whatever is next for us, we can be sure of one thing we'll want to avoid. Ego. It makes all the steps hard, but failure is the one it will make permanent. Here we shall wind up the video. If you like this, give a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do subscribe and hit bell icon to get notified about the latest updates. Be happy, be safe.